Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
You've been on a mission to take my pride away from me. You don't ever listen, and you live with your complacency. You don't scare me, but you should fear me. The sun is setting, don't trust your hearing. You made a monster, I'm your imposter. Go ahead and wander, but don't trust the water. I'm another of the deep.
Good morning. Hello. How are you? Let me put up my little banners here. I'm going to talk about something important. Not dumb shit. Real stuff that's happening in the world. Not this dumb petty bullshit from these wretched 60-year-olds who are coming here to complain about everything wrong. So instead of that, we're going to talk about something real important. And I think that most of us came here because of the summer wells, and we're all also involved in other missing child cases and child trafficking. And this came up in my news feed, and I thought it was a hell of a lot more important than one says. Okay, so we're going to play this real quick and talk about real drama that affects us on the daily in America.
Your phone is not on.
There is a very significant challenge that we are.
Rewind that. Here we go.
Good morning, Secretary Mayorkas.
Good morning.
Is there a crisis at our southern border?
Senator,
Is there a crisis?
Senator, there's a very significant challenge.
I think your
that we are
microphone is not
confronting.
on.
There is a very significant challenge that we are facing.
Yes or no,
at the
is
southern
there a
border.
crisis?
I believe I've addressed that question.
So you're
Senator.
refusing to answer.
Senator, there is a very significant challenge, and
Will
we
you
are
answer if there's a crisis?
Therefore, we are dedicating the resources.
Okay, so you're refusing to answer. Well, Secretary Mayorkas, I'll tell you someone who is willing to answer, which is your and President Biden's chief of the Border Patrol in a sworn deposition in July of 2022 when asked, would you agree, Chief Ortiz, that the southern border is currently in crisis? Answer, yes. Notice none of those wiggle words, none of that equivocation. One word, one syllable, yes. Are you willing to speak with the same clarity as Chief Ortiz? Is there a crisis at our southern border, yes or no?
Senator, I'm very proud to work alongside.
So you
and
refuse to
support-
answer. Let me ask you the next question. Has the crisis at our southern border made Americans less safe, yes or no?
Senator, we are dedicated to the safety
Has
and
the crisis
security
made Americans less
of
safe? I don't want a discourse. It's a yes or no question.
Senator, we have a challenge of
You refuse to
immigration.
answer the question.
Not
Mr. Secretary, let me show you how someone doing his job answers a question in a straightforward manner. Chief Ortiz, is the crisis that is currently ongoing at the southern border making the border less safe for Americans and aliens alike? Answer, yes. One word, one syllable, 3 letters. That's how someone answers a question and does their job. You're being a politician misleading the American people. Let me give you a chance again. Will you show the same integrity Chief Ortiz shows? Is the crisis at the southern border making Americans less safe? Yes or no?
Senator, we have 260,000.
You refuse to
people
answer the
dedicated
question. Let's move on.
And security of the
Next
American
question, Mr. Mayorkas. Has the crisis made aliens less safe? Yes or no?
Senator, we are seeking.
So you won't answer that question either.
If you-
It's a yes or no. Has it made aliens less safe?
Senator, smugglers are exploiting.
Has the
vulnerable
crisis
migrants.
made aliens, yes, less safe? Are you willing to answer it?
Senator, the smuggling organizations.
Okay, you're
seek to
filibustering again. Let me ask you this question. How many migrants have died under President Biden?
Senator, your phrasing of the question is actually quite misleading.
How many migrants died in 2022?
Approaching our southern border?
Yes.
Precisely why we are seeking to
So
exclude the smuggling
do you know the answer? Do you know how many died?
I do not.
You do not. Of course you don't. I know how many died. 853.
That is
853. And by the way, here are the numbers that have died every year. You go back to 1998, you see it's consistently between 300 and 400, 300, 400, 300, 400. Suddenly, 2021, what happens? You get in office, and that red line are dead bodies. I've been on the Rio Grande, and I've seen dead bodies floating there who've drowned because of your refusal to do your job. You don't even know how many have died. What do you say to the Texas farmers and ranchers who find pregnant ladies dead on their property, who find toddlers dead on their property? What do you say to them?
I say that is why precisely we are taking it to the smuggling organizations.
But you are not. That is simply not true.
Number two, it is why we are dedicated.
Let me read from the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal 2 weeks ago ran an article entitled, "It's like a graveyard. Record numbers of migrants are dying at the border." The story begins with this chilling line, quote, Eagle Pass, Texas. Local officials keep a refrigerated truck to hold the bodies of migrants who drown in the currents of the Rio Grande while trying to cross the border into the U.S. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that this article be entered into the record. Let me ask you a different question. How many children have been sexually assaulted by human traffickers under the Biden administration?
Senator, this is precisely why we instituted.
I don't want a lecture. It's a question. How many children have been sexually assaulted by human traffickers under your administration?
Senator, this is exactly why on January 5th we announced the parole
do you know
program.
how many? Do you know how many children have been sexually assaulted?
This is why we.
Okay, you're going to refuse to answer that question as well. Let's move on. It's obvious you've been instructed to stonewall, so I'm not going to let you. You don't get to stonewall and filibuster. Now, one of my Democratic colleagues before said that the Democrat talking point, quote, this problem. That's, look, I get if you're a person spinner, if you're something to say about the absolute that's played out under the Biden administration. True or false, Secretary Mayorkas, 2020 was the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. Is that true or false?
It is certainly the lowest level of immigration in many, many years. And what was it
Okay, fine.
in 2020? What was it, Senator, in 2020 that impacted the entire world, including the United States?
Okay, so your testimony is the reason we had the lowest rate was COVID. It had nothing to do with building the wall, nothing to do with any catch and release, nothing to do with Remain in Mexico. With all respect, Mr. Secretary, that answer is laughable. And in fact, if you look at illegal immigration, let's look at CBP encounters. You can see 500,000, 500,000, it drops to the lowest level, and boom, what happens? You show up, and that red line is you. That red line is Joe Biden. And you're claiming nothing happened. Oh, gosh, this was here before us. No, you made the decision to allow this to happen. Let me ask you, we now have over 5.5 million people who've entered this country illegally under Joe Biden. How many murderers have you released into America?
Senator, I'm not aware of any murderer whom we've.
So you don't know?
Senator, let me say something.
Do you know?
If you take a look at.
No, you don't get to give a speech. Do you know how many murderers you've released?
I'm just trying to answer your question.
How many rapists
Senator.
have you released?
Senator, I'm trying
Do you
to
know?
answer your question.
You can answer, I know or I don't know.
Senator, any individual who poses
Giving
a
them
public safety
hell.
threat.
How many child
Giving them
molesters have you
hell.
released?
And removed into the United States, from the United States.
Oh, so your testimony under oath, subject to perjury, is that you have not released any murderers, rapists, or child molesters among the 5.5 million. Is that your testimony?
Mr. Chairman, may I have the opportunity?
No,
to
you may
act-
not. You may answer my question.
You're not-
Is that your testimony, yes or no?
Senator, you're not allowing me to answer your
I am allowing you to answer. I'm not allowing you to filibuster.
If you take a look at the pace of immigration in 2018 to 2019.
You're refusing
you
to
will see
answer.
a
Let's
dramatic-
move on. Let's
you will
move on
see-
to gotaways. Gotaways are the people that get away that you know about. Now, what happened under your administration? Gotaways consistently down at this low line, boom, you get in. And they go from below 180,000 to 600,000. Now, I'll tell you this about a gotaway. You don't know among those 100,000 a year, you have no idea how many murders.
That is precisely why the
Correct? Do
numbers-
you?
That is precisely
So you
why-
refuse to answer the question. You know how many are rapists? Do you know how many are rapists? This is a question. You're a lawyer. You know how to answer questions. Of the 600,000, do you know how many of them were rapists?
Senator, this is why we
So again,
are.
the answer is no. Let me ask you this. Do you know how many of them are terrorists? And I don't want to, Senator, here's my lecture on this. Do you know how many of the 600,000 gotaways were terrorists? Yes or no?
Senator, we are focused on the.
You
safety
refuse
and
to answer
security.
that as well. What's the result of massive gotaways? Well, one of the results is drug overdoses. And we now have last year over 100,000 overdoses who died, the majority from Chinese fentanyl streaming across the border. Now, you told Senator Cornyn you care, but look what has happened under your policy. When you open up the border to the worst illegal immigration in our nation's history, people die. You claim you care. Mr. Secretary, that is a lie. You know, some months ago, Karine Jean-Pierre stood up at a White House briefing and said, people are not just walking across the border. Was she telling the truth?
Senator, you are
Was she telling the
so
truth?
profoundly disrespecting.
Was she telling
my
the truth?
22 years
Okay,
of government service.
you get to answer questions. You don't
Senator-
get to give speeches.
Senator, I served as a federal prosecutor.
All right,
for
you're
12
refusing
years.
to answer. If you look at, she was lying, and she was not lying on her own. She was lying on behalf of the President of the United States. Now, the photograph of people walking. She was lying on behalf of the President of the United States. This is a photograph from just one day along the Rio Grande of hundreds of thousands of people walking across the border. You have allowed this to happen. The photograph that was before. What are these wristbands?
I don't know what they are.
You
Senator.
don't know what they are. Mr. Secretary, you have just testified to the American people you're incompetent at your job, because I've been to the southern border, and if you go to the southern border, along the southern border, you see thousands of these wristbands because the illegal immigrants wear them. The drug cartels, every color corresponds to how many thousands of dollars they owe the cartels. You turn these cartels into multi-billion-dollar criminal organizations, and these are modern-day leg irons because these are children being sold into sex slavery, and you don't even know what they are. That is astonishing. Mr. Secretary, how many children have been sold into sex slavery under your administration?
Senator, we are taking it to the cartels.
How many
and the
children have been
smuggling
sold into sex slavery?
in an
Do you know how many children have been
unprecedented-
sold into sex slavery?
to an unprecedented degree.
Mr. Secretary, I want to say to you right now,
It is
your
precisely-
behavior is disgraceful, and the deaths, the children assaulted, the children raped, they are at your feet, and if you had integrity, you would resign. And I will tell you, the men and women of the Border Patrol, they've never had a political leader undermine them. They despise you, Mr. Secretary, because you're willing to let children be raped to follow political orders. This is a crisis, it's a disgrace, and you won't admit this human tragedy is a crisis.
Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. Let me start with what I hope is a simple question. Do we need to have more or fewer people coming to our southern border?
Senator, we are working on diminishing the number of people whom we encounter at our southern border because of the challenge it presents. We're trying to build lawful, safe, and orderly ways to accomplish that.
Okay, fewer. So we need to have fewer. Means we need to roll back incentives to come. So I would have thought that would have been the answer. Let's talk about what you're doing, though. In January of this year, you rolled out a new phone app called CBP One, an app for a cell phone. I've got a picture of it behind me here. This phone app allows, and I'm going to quote from your own fact sheet, it allows, and I quote, non-citizens without appropriate documents for admission to schedule an appointment to come to the border. They can now go on their phone and schedule a time to come to the border and then be admitted. And you identified 7 separate border points of entry where they could come. 5 of them in Texas, 2 of them in California, 1 in Arizona. It's like a concierge service for illegal immigrants. My question is, you didn't think the border crisis was bad enough that now we're going to have an app that allows illegals to schedule their appointments and come and be admitted to this country?
Senator, you're mischaracterizing the use of the application. Let me explain it to you. We are currently enforcing the public health order of Title 42, and I know you're very familiar with it. There is a process for individuals who claim an exception to the Title 42 expulsion authority because of an acute medical condition.
Well, let's talk about this app.
If I may finish, an urgent humanitarian reason. So instead,
I'm going to throw this out there to you guys in the bushes listening. What if? Thank you, Dee Dee. Thanks for coming. What if, hypothetical, the whole Ernie Shell saga was an experiment to see how many of us are sheep and how many of us will use our minds to think for ourselves? What if it was an experiment to see how many Bobo dollies we have in the United States that will just go along with the mass, that will vote just because their friends do for a particular candidate? Out of social pressure, they voted for Biden. What if this was a social experiment to see how many of you are free thinkers, or to see how many of you just follow in line because everybody says that's who you should hate this week, and everybody says we should attack him this week? So we just go along with everybody because we want Kels to like us, and Sarah to like us, and Chaotic to like us, and Jimbo to like us. We want everybody to like us, and Ernie and Mama T. So we follow the masses because we're afraid to stand on our own 2 feet, even if that means not getting super chats, even if that means people not coming and watching you. Independent thinking. What if this was an experiment? Like Cheshire Cat says, go read her post.
of them coming in between the ports of entry to claim that urgent medical condition, extraordinarily acute humanitarian cause, we allow a limited number to arrive at our ports of entry and seek the emergency relief that they need.
Schedule, you allow them, let's be particular about what you do.
And I should say that the CBP One app was not unveiled for the first time on January 5th of this year.
Oh, no, but you changed it. You made it available on January 5th to the illegals themselves. You don't have to be a lawyer to use it. You don't have to be a member of a non-governmental organization. Anybody can download the app and use it on their phone. And for the first time, you allow them to schedule appointments. Now, let's talk about what actually happens when they come to the border. It's interesting. You characterized this when you rolled it out as an application for applying for asylum. But nowhere on the app do you actually require the illegal migrants to apply for asylum or to claim asylum or anything about asylum. And in fact, when they then get to the border, you don't ask them questions You don't do interviews, you just release them. Here's the Texas Monthly, not a notable conservative outlet, who reports, and I quote, "At no point does the app ask users, are you seeking asylum? Those arriving for the CBP-1 appointments are given no interviews, asked no questions about vulnerabilities that they may or may not have listed in the app or about why they're coming to the United States. They're simply released into the country," end quote. So rather than building a wall, Mr. Secretary, you have built Ticketmaster for illegal immigrants.
You are, Senator, you are conflating programs. Let me
Well,
explain to
just
you.
respond to this. Is it true that they are given no interviews, asked no questions, and simply released into the country?
Let me explain to you what we announced on January 5th.
No, I want you to explain to me what's happening. I know what you announced. I read it to you.
So I will explain to you what is happening.
Are they given interviews? Let's start with that. Are they given interviews?
Absolutely, the CIA does put things like this in place years to an election just to see and gauge what the crowd is doing. How many, what percentage of us are not free thinkers and we just go along with the crowd because we want to be liked so much? Myself, I could care less how many of y'all I shed if it is detrimental to my freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom of press, all of it.
We were previously experiencing
That's
almost-
starting to
almost-
sound like a no. Well, let's just
90
tone in here. Mr.
almost-
Secretary, my time is very limited. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to drive to some clarity here.
But Senator,
The Texas Monthly has reported that once illegal immigrants go on their service that you've created for them, when they come, they are given no interviews. They are asked no questions about any vulnerabilities. They are simply released into the country. Is that happening?
Senator, you are mistaken. And if I may explain,
Are they given interviews?
if I may explain, individuals who seek parole under our January 5th program for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans are screened and vetted before they arrive at our border.
Wait a minute. No, they go on they go on the phone and they just reserve a time and then they show up and they're given nothing. Listen to this. Even immigration advocates are amazed about this. Here, also from the Texas Monthly. Here's one immigration advocate whose first name is Orta. She says, that's the crazy part. Nothing in this new program requires you to actually seek asylum. Somehow, we've decided to punish those who arrive at the border without the app, who may be seeking asylum, but we just let in anybody who may or may not have any particular reason to seek asylum, so long as they've made an appointment on your Ticketmaster app. This seems crazy to me.
Senator, it's a complete mischaracterization of the program that we announced and are implementing
So how many people have used the app then?
that you are referring to. So if I can explain.
How many people have used the app?
So we had a significant surge of Cubans.
How many people have used the app?
Nicaraguans and Venezuelans.
Mr. Secretary, you're here to answer my questions. How many people have used the app?
Tens of thousands have sought to make an appointment at the port of entry under our parole program.
Okay, good. How many have been admitted without an interview at the border?
You are, again, inserting a fact that does not belong in your question. So if I can, I will get you the precise.
I'm reading to you from public reports about how your own app works. You're just blanket deny. Actually, you're not quite denying it. You're saying that maybe we don't understand. Apparently, I don't understand. Texas Monthly doesn't understand. Immigration advocate don't understand. You're the only one who understands. Yet you won't answer my question. How much does it cost to develop, buddy?
I don't have the cost, but let me share with you a critical
Well, will you
fact.
get it for us?
Let me share with you a critical
Will you
fact.
get us the cost of what to develop this app?
Happily,
Did you contract with a tech firm to develop it?
we have seen an approximately
for heaven's sake.
95% decrease.
Did you contract with a tech firm to develop it? Yes or no?
Senator, this was led by
Get
U.S.
'em,
Customs
man.
and Border
Get 'em.
Protection,
Get
our
'em.
technical experts within the agency, and I certainly will get an answer to your question whether outside consultants were utilized
you don't
in the
know.
development process.
You don't know.
May I explain to you, since you have a misunderstanding of the program, what it is and the impact, the positive impact it has had on encounters of these.
To this border to make appointments, to not be interviewed, and then how many have just been released? Is it true, by the way, as the Texas Monthly reports, that they're simply released into the country on official parole? And get this, they're not given, according to their reporting, any kind of follow-up. Their court dates are in immigration courts, Texas Monthly reports, not even necessarily asylum trials. They're often general deportation hearings where defendants can make arguments for remaining in the country. Is that true?
That is a completely mistaken understanding of how the immigration process works. That language is completely confusing and erroneous.
Well, it is confusing. What's confusing is why anybody would think that an app like this, to allow illegal immigrants to literally reserve a time to come to the border and then be ushered in without an interview, without follow-up, without tracking, is stunning. It's absolutely stunning. Let me ask you in my very short time remaining something else about Chinese nationals. I've only got a minute left.
That is false.
Let me ask you about the Chinese nationals who we all saw coming over the border, busloads of them, and then being released in the American interior. What's the percentage increase of Chinese nationals who crossed the border this year, Mr. Secretary? Let's just focus on maybe the Rio Grande Valley
The
sector.
number of Chinese nationals encountered at our southern border has increased significantly.
Do you know how much?
Over the past, I don't have the precise.
I do. It's 900% just in the Rio Grande Valley sector. Are any of these people who came in this bus, these Chinese nationals, members of the Chinese Communist Party?
Senator, if an individual presents a national security or public safety threat, we detain them during the pendency
That's not what I asked. I asked if they're members of the CCP.
during the pendency of their removal proceedings.
Are any of these individuals members of the CCP?
So
I think
if
there's about
indeed-
70 who came on this bus.
If indeed they are determined to be a national security threat or a threat to public safety, we detain them pending their removal proceedings.
Were any of these individuals detained, or were they released into the interior of the country?
I don't have awareness of that particular group of individuals.
And so you don't know if any of them were members of the CCP? Or actually, you do know, you just won't say.
I don't know from the photograph, Senator, to whom.
But
you're
surely you
precisely
know about the folks who, you've read this report, you're the Secretary of Homeland Security, you're aware of these individuals. Were any of them members of the Chinese Communist Party coming into this country?
Senator, you're providing me with a group of individuals without names, identities, or.
So you're not familiar with this incident that was widely reported on at the southern border? Don't you think it's strange that we have busloads of Chinese nationals coming across our southern border? I'm asking you, from a hostile country, I'm asking you if they're members of the Chinese Communist Party, and you don't know, apparently, you won't say.
We are very focused on all things with respect to the People's Republic of
But you
China.
don't know any of the details. I plead exhaustion, Mr. Secretary. You have exhausted me, you have exhausted this panel, you have exhausted the patience of the American people. You should resign.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr. Secretary, do you agree with the President that we should ban the private ownership of assault weapons in America?
Senator, I do.
What is an assault weapon?
It is, for example, an AK-47.
Can you give me a definition other than just pointing to a specific weapon? Would there be other weapons besides an AK-47 you would ban?
There very well are. And I remember when I was a federal prosecutor in the Central District of California from September 25th, 1989 to, I believe it was April 2001.
And I thank you for your service, but if you could answer my question.
The vast majority of law enforcement officers, leaders with whom I worked were greatly in support of the assault weapons ban.
Mr. Chairman, you know
because of-
why we get so frustrated with you? Because you won't give straight answers.
I think I just did.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't. Do you have a definition of an assault weapon?
I am confident there's a technical definition of what is an assault weapon, and it was assuredly used in the context of the statute that previously existed banning assault weapons.
Mr. Secretary, our southern border is not secure, is it?
Senator, I have spoken about this. I believe I've addressed this earlier in the hearing.
Why don't you address it again?
Of course. Let me share with you a few things. Number one, when I speak of the security of the border, I am speaking of maximizing the resources we have to deliver the most effective results.
So
and let me assure you that we are doing
secure
so.
because we're trying to secure it. Are we succeeding?
Senator, we are so focused on the security of our southern border. We are doing so much with
But you're
respect
not
to
succeeding.
the surge of personnel.
How you're not succeeding?
Oh, Senator, let me share with you that the challenge of migration that we are experiencing at our southern border is not exclusive to the United States. It is something that is gripping the entire
But
hemisphere.
my job is to worry about the United States.
As
Mr.
is
Chairman.
mine. As is mine.
And here's my question. Let me try to rephrase it. And I really do wish, I understand the position you're in, but you really should try to do a better job of answering the questions. Under the Biden administration, we have the most encounters. We have had the most encounters with people attempting to come into our country illegally in the history of ever. Under the Biden administration, we have had the most people entering our country illegally in the history of ever. Under the Biden administration, we have had the most gotaways at our southern border in the history of ever. Under the Biden administration, we have had the most number of people entering our country under a claim of asylum, having that claim turned down and still not being deported in the history of ever. And under the Biden administration, we've had the most fentanyl coming into our country in the history of ever. How can you possibly say the southern border is secure?
Do you know
I
that-
understand your answer that you're trying, but I'm not asking about your efforts. I'm asking about the results.
Well, let's talk about the results then, Senator. Do you know that last year we expelled and removed approximately 1.4 million people from the southern border? I believe that's the most ever. Do you realize that we are focused on enforcing our laws to achieve the security of the southern border?
I know you're focused, Mr. Chairman, or Mr. Secretary, but you're not succeeding.
Senator,
And when you come testify to us, you talk about how you're trying really hard. And I don't have any way to disprove that. I accept that statement in good faith. But the numbers belie that.
If I can, Senator, let me give you an example of a solution that we have delivered that for some reason is being contested. Because it's caused the 95.
I gave you 30 seconds, okay?
It's caused the 95.
Don't filibuster me. You've been doing that all day. I'm just trying to ask you
I'm just trying to communicate. It has led to approximately 95% drop in the number of encounters in between the ports of entry at our southern border of Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans.
Mr. Secretary,
on January 5th. And why would that be opposed when it is delivering precisely the result that you seek?
Did you just parachute in from another planet, Mr. Secretary? Because you're the only person in the Milky Way who believes that we're not having massive illegal immigration into America.
Senator, you're putting words into my mouth.
No, sir, I'm accurately describing the situation.
There is no question that we have a very serious challenge at our southern border.
Okay.
It is a challenge.
We can agree on that. Let me ask you another question. Why don't you just declare a new policy that other than children, if you present at the southern border, you claim refugee status, you claim political asylum, and you haven't claimed refugee status and political asylum at the first safe country, then you can't come in.
Senator, so first of all, when one presents at the border, it's an asylum claim, not a
But why
refugee.
don't you do that? Why don't
Not
you
a
just
refugee claim.
unilaterally declare that a safe third country policy? It would work. You can't come into America. If you're coming from Venezuela and you come through Mexico, if you didn't claim asylum in Mexico, you can't come here. You have to leave. Why don't you just do that?
Well, Senator, let me give you an example with respect to Mexico. A safe third country agreement, let's hypothetically
you
assume.
don't have to have an agreement with Mexico.
Yes, you do.
No, you don't.
I believe you do,
No,
Senator.
you don't.
I'll have
Other
to-
countries don't do it. Just adopt a policy that says, except for children, because you don't want to send children back by themselves. Just adopt a new policy that if you didn't seek asylum in the first safe third country, you can't come in, period.
Senator, are you aware of the notice of proposed rulemaking that we issued, the comment period of which closed yesterday?
You've had 2 years to adopt a policy like I just described. Why haven't you done it?
So, Senator, what we have done is
But why haven't you done that?
we have surged enforcement resources. We have
Why haven't
developed.
you just adopted, please, if you would, Mr. Secretary, answer my question.
It is my understanding.
Why haven't you adopted unilaterally a safe third country policy? That would stop, except for children, all the folks from the Northern Triangle countries, all the folks from Venezuela, all the folks from Cuba, all the folks from the Middle East from coming into our country. Why haven't you done that?
Senator, it's my understanding that those are two things. It is my understanding that those agreements do require.
You don't have to have an agreement
agreement.
with anybody. It can be a policy established by the Department of Homeland Security.
Senator, I'd have to review the.
You
legal-
haven't reviewed that? You haven't considered that possibility?
Let me finish, if I may.
Sure.
I would have to review the legal underpinnings of your
Well, you
assertion.
better get reviewing.
And I also
You ought to
do
get
not-
reviewing. This is the
Get
first
him,
time that's
Kennedy.
occurred to you.
I also do not think that that is sound policy.
You don't
to
think
shut-
this is the first time that's occurred to you?
I also do not think that that is sound policy, that we should shut down our entire asylum system.
I didn't say shut down the entire asylum system. I said safe third country. All you have to do, Mr. Secretary, if you're really serious, and it's beginning, frankly, to appear that you're not, is adopt a policy that says we're not seeking anyone's agreement. We don't have to. If you're coming from another country and you come through, let's say Mexico, and you say you're seeking asylum, you have to seek it in Mexico or the other first safe third country, or you can't come in. Period. Done. End of story.
The rose and thistle.
Why don't you do that?
Senator, I don't think that we have the unilateral authority.
Sure you do. Other countries
Number one
do
and
it.
number two, as
Have
I've
you tried
mentioned,
sneaking into China?
as I've mentioned, I do not think that is sound policy.
Why?
Because you are basically shutting down our asylum.
You're saying we honor your right to seek political asylum, but you're
Rose.
cherry picking. Do it in Mexico first. Why haven't you done that?
I think I've addressed that issue, Senator.
You don't want to do it, Mr. Secretary. That's what it's beginning to look like, because you think our borders ought to be open, and it would be more intellectually honest if you just say that.
That is false.
I don't agree with you. You have to watch up here what people do, not what they say, and everything else is just cottage cheese.
Senator, I don't think
Thank you,
I don't
Mr.
think the 1.4 million people who were expelled or removed last year would consider the border open.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary, you've had millions coming into the country illegally. The most of the history of ever under your watch. And everybody knows that, apparently, except you. Either that or you're not being forthcoming.
Also had the largest number of individuals expelled or removed from the southern border. And if one takes a look at the apprehension and encounter numbers, and then the removal numbers, one would have a different view.
If you do the safe third country policy, that'll solve half of your problem right there.
Thank
And
you,
you're
Senator.
not denying anybody asylum.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I begin my questions today, I do want to express my heartbreak at what happened yesterday in Nashville at Covenant School and Covenant Presbyterian Church. And my family and I are grieving along with the rest of the community. And I thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your call yesterday, your kind remarks today. And violence against children is just one of the most heinous crimes.
I really like this
And
lady.
the families there at Covenant Pres and Covenant School, I just grieve for what they're going through. We have to work to protect children at school, and that means increasing security. And I have had legislation that would allow for training and hiring of veterans and former law enforcement officials to serve as school safety officers and to help protect our schools. It is time for us to pass that and to help keep our children safe. I'd like to turn to the questions that are in front today, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for your patience today. I want to go to this issue of human smuggling. And under this administration, the human smuggling business has gone from being a $500 million a year business to a $13 billion a year industry. And we heard from Secretary Becerra last week at our Senate Finance Committee. And we've got 85,000 unaccompanied alien children, migrant children, who have been released in the U.S. The HHS has lost track of these unaccompanied children. So my question to you is this: how many of these children are being trafficked? How many of these children are being put into the sex trade? What are you doing to try to find these children? And when you look at what is happening to women and children, do you all understand that it is the policies of this administration, what you're doing on the border, that is causing 85,000 children to be lost, can't find them, and not knowing if they're being trafficked, put in gangs, put in the sex trade? So what are you all doing to find these children? And do you understand that it is the policies that is causing this?
Senator, let me share with you what we are doing to address the scourge of human smuggling and human trafficking. And let me say, with respect to the unaccompanied children, and this will echo what I shared with Senator Ossoff. With respect to unaccompanied children, when we receive them at the border, it is our legal obligation to release them to the care of the Department of Health and Human Services within
That's right. And now they cannot find them.
within 72 hours.
85,000.
And so what we do is we release
Is that
them.
an acceptable number?
Oh, absolutely not.
Right.
Absolutely not.
So
But-
what?
So let me share with you. So we release them. One of the reasons why we are devoting our worksite enforcement resources and energies on unscrupulous employers is precisely for the reason that you identify. We must hold accountable employers who engage in
Okay.
child
I
labor.
appreciate that. Let's look
With
at it.
respect, with
Yeah.
respect to the border,
Yeah, and
we-
let's look at it this way.
two efforts we have underway. One is we are taking it to the smugglers in an unprecedented
They haven't
effort.
gotten that message.
Oh, yes, they have. We have.
I beg to differ, because the situation, it is now a $13 billion a year business. When you go to that border, as I have done, and when you talk to women that have been trafficked and have gotten themselves out and have been raped repeatedly, there is a sexual assault epidemic going on that border. And it is because of the policies of this administration.
Senator,
And it is so,
Senator, it is because of the hate
What is
that do not
incentivizing
care,
that?
that do not
That's right.
care.
That's exactly right. And you and I agree on that. They do not care about human life. They see people as a product.
Yes, they are.
And a way to make a buck because they are billion-dollar businesses. They have, and let me turn to the fentanyl epidemic because we've all talked about this. And I'm hearing from some of my sheriffs now that from a border town sheriff, that fentanyl appeal now is down to about 5 cents because they've teamed up with the Chinese scientists. They're making these in the labs with the cartels. And I think that you've talked a little bit about the fentanyl today, but you really don't have an estimate of how much is truly coming over that border. And we know that you're saying that they are catching about 95% of that. But what I have heard is what you're giving us is the CBP numbers. You're not giving us the numbers that are coming from air and marine operations. You're not including the Coast Guard. You're not including the DEA, and you're not including what is found by state and local law enforcement. So why won't you look at the holistic number of what everybody is finding?
Oh, Senator, the scourge of fentanyl is something that we do not in any way underestimate. Let me, if I may, share with you. As I mentioned earlier, I served as a federal prosecutor for 12 years.
Yes.
I prosecuted
No,
cocaine.
you're not answering my
Oh, no, if
question,
I
and I've
can.
only got 3 minutes left.
If I can.
Why are you not, why do you not include what everybody is finding? State and local law
we do.
enforcement, the
But the-
DEA, the
Oh,
Marine?
We do. Senator, the question that was posed to me was with respect to the southern border and how fentanyl is trafficked into the United States.
Okay, I
And
need
the
to
vast
move
majority
on,
of
but
it-
if you
Vast
will,
majority of it is brought in through the ports of entry.
no, sir, I beg to differ with that. When you talk to Border Patrol and you talk to local sheriffs, I would like to get from you in writing a total number of what you are finding, not only from CBP, but also from the air and marine operations, the Coast Guard, the DEA, and state and local law enforcement. Let me move on about the gotaways, because we've had over 1.2 million migrants that have evaded authorities and have come into the country illegally. And it is of concern to me when I hear you all try to make illegal legal. There's an app for this, and allowing people to continue to come in illegally. Now, ICE arrested 220 illegal immigrants in 9 days that had criminal convictions of rape and murder. Now, it doesn't take rocket science to go figure out that in those 1.2 million that are unknown gotaways or known gotaways, that number that have disappeared in our country, that you've got murderers and criminals and rapists that are in that number, the gotaways. So how many of those have made it into Tennessee? How many are in our communities? How many are in our streets? Are you all tracking these, or have you lost them like the 85,000 children?
Senator, I would say two things. Number one, we are intensely focused on securing the border, as I have testified earlier. Number
Okay,
one. And
then-
number two, I think it's very important not to paint with a broad brush individuals who come to the United States.
Well, I think it's important to note what Border Patrol is telling us. If you're intent on securing the border, then you spend $50 million a year to caretake the items, components from the border wall project that was in the previous administration. The border wall, by the way, the Border Patrol has been asking for a physical barrier for decades. I think about 30 years in total. So instead of wasting that money to do nothing with the construction material, why don't you use those remaining materials and that $50 million and fill in the gaps in this wall so that the Border Patrol has a physical barrier that they need.
Senator, I've approved the vast majority of the projects to close the gaps and complete the gates with respect to the funding that we received.
Mr. Chairman, I have one other question on Chinese nationals that I will submit for a written answer. Thank you.
It's so easy to get your windshield replaced using SafeLight. Tell the people why you haven't done it already, my man.
It started off as a chip and grew into a crack, and it just keeps going.
So what do we do now?
I went ahead and scheduled an appointment online at safelight.com. Told them to meet us here at the beach.
Let's get started.
Oh, SafeLight repair.
SafeLight replace.
Okay, hold on one second. I'm looking for another one that I wanted to show you. Give me 2 seconds to locate it. Should be in my history here. Hope everybody's having an awesome morning. This one was of hang on, where did it go? Where did it go? Almost there. Let's see. Here it is. So I'm going to share the screen. Okay, here we go.
Judge on the far end. Tell me what Article 5 of the Constitution does.
Article 5 is not coming to mind at the moment.
Okay. How about Article 2?
Neither is Article 2.
Okay. Do you know what purposivism is?
In my 12 years as an assistant attorney general and my 9 years serving as a judge, I was not faced with that precise question. We are the highest trial court in Washington state, so I'm frequently faced with issues that I'm not familiar with, and I thoroughly review the law, research, and apply the law to the facts presented to me.
Well, you're going to be faced with it if you're confirmed. I can assure you of that. Can you tell me what the independent state legislature theory is? I'm just asking you, not your opinion of what is it? It's before the Supreme Court now.
In my 12 years as a Washington State Assistant Attorney General, and
Right.
that particular doctrine was not presented to me.
I'm out of time. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, this committee is in the process of considering 29 judicial nominees in a single morning. Now, it's not uncommon when a new Congress comes in to take up nominees that didn't pass in the previous Congress. But typically, there's a reason that nominees don't pass in the previous Congress, which is they are often the most extreme and most problematic nominees. In this instance, that is emphatically the case. And many of these nominees are quite literally the most extreme judicial nominees I've seen in 10 years on the Senate. Part of the reason the Democrat majority is trying to move 29 nominees in one morning
we're all thinking
is to flood the zone with so many bad nominees that nobody can focus on how utterly unqualified these nominees are to be judges.
hilarious.
The nominee being considered right now. Nancy Abudu, Senator Lee, did a good job of walking through her extreme record. She was the deputy legal director at the Southern Poverty Law Center, an organization that has a long and shameful history of labeling mainstream conservative groups as, quote, hate groups. And the SPLC's history is so egregious that it prompted a violent hate crime. In 2010, the SPLC designated the Family Research Council as a hate group, and 2 years later, a man targeted the Family Research Council using the SPLC's hate map.
Once again, what if this whole Ernie Shell saga was written by the CIA, like Rose has suggested, to see how many of us just go along with the masses who are not strong enough and courageous enough to stand on their own, even if that means cutting their income in half. A war of morals.
And came in and shot and critically wounded the council's business manager and attempted to murder several council members before being heroically.
A lot of people ask us, what's the difference between mud water and mushroom coffee? First, we are mushroom coffee. Mushroom.
Do you
Stop.
just go along with everybody else because you
By
want
the
to be
building
liked?
security guard.
Do you just go along with everybody else through peer pressure?
The SPLC in 2019
Hey, Robert, good to see you.
authored an article
Hey.
that accused
I'm watching them address
Republicans,
Homeland
including
Security.
3 members of this committee, of holding, quote, open white supremacist views. Mr. Chairman, that's ridiculous. You know that's ridiculous. Political rhetoric is one thing, but when you have extreme leftists falsely claiming white supremacy, it illustrates
He said
that you are dealing with
5.5
radicals
million had crossed the
and
border.
partisan zealots. Nancy Abudu isn't the only
5.5
nominee
million
that this committee is trying to move
have come
forward.
across the border.
This committee also has before it Nusrat Chowdhury, who is another extreme zealot. Ms. Chowdhury believes that America is through and through an evil and racist place. And she's not been shy about explaining that. She has stated that, quote, the structure of racial discrimination in America, quote, is so deep, so pernicious, that you have to, quote, use the law as a tool of social justice. Does anyone think she's going to stop, quote, using the law as a tool of social justice if she ascends to the bench? The most concerning thing Ms. Chowdhury said, she
CRUZ is
participated in
giving
the
them
panel
hell,
at my
man.
alma mater, Princeton University. The panel was entitled How Activism Informs Policy. And one of the panelists there suggested that police officers kill unarmed black men every day.
Trigger warning.
Now,
Trigger
there's a
warning.
technical term for that statement. That's called a lie. It's not even kind of sort of right. It is wildly, totally false. During her nomination hearing, she was asked about a tweet that came from that event, which said that she had agreed with the statement that police officers kill unarmed black men every single day. At first, she claimed she couldn't remember making the statement. Then later in the same hearing, she claimed she did make the statement, but she did so, quote, as an advocate. She said so 3 separate times. Well, I just, did it as an advocate. Now, most of the members of this committee have practiced law. The last I checked, as an advocate, you have an obligation not to lie. And that is a brazen lie that is dangerous. Now, subsequently, she sent a follow-up letter after her hearing saying, oh, never mind, I didn't say it. The thing that she had justified as, oh, I said it as an advocate. Afterwards, she sent a letter and said, no, actually, I didn't say it. Republicans on this committee asked for a follow-up hearing to ask about her miraculous new memory post-hearing that she didn't say such a harmful thing to police officers across the country. Sadly, the chairman wouldn't give us a new hearing. Another of the judges being considered today, Kenley Cato. At her hearing, I asked her a very simple question. Is racial discrimination wrong? She was utterly unable to answer it. Today's Democrat Party embraces racial discrimination, believes that discriminating based on race, the reason, Mr. Chairman, and you are smirking, but the reason she couldn't answer it is because in law school, she had written an article advocating racial discrimination against Asian Americans. Now, Ms. Cato is Asian American. And she said, and I'm paraphrasing here, I don't have the article in front of me, but she essentially said that Asian Americans who didn't support explicit racial discrimination against Asian Americans weren't sufficiently woke. They weren't sufficiently enlightened. Now, I think that's a noxious position. But that's, of course, why she couldn't answer that racial discrimination was wrong, because she is an advocate for racial discrimination. Another one of the nominees being considered this morning is Dale Ho. Dale Ho is a self-described, quote, wild-eyed sort of leftist. Now, let me be clear. That's not my terminology. That's how he describes himself. He says, I am a, quote, wild-eyed sort of leftist. He wrote about how he's motivated each day by his hate for conservatives. That's the word he used, hate. Now, I want you to pause for a second and imagine. I'm going to ask the Democrat members of this committee to do something, which is imagine you're in somebody else's shoes. Engage in empathy.
Engage in empathy.
There are actually conservatives in the state of New York. Now, the Democrat governor of New York said to Republicans in New York, you're not New Yorkers, get the hell out, go to Florida where you belong. There's an arrogance to telling your voters that. But it's one thing when you're an elected official if you want to demonstrate that kind of arrogance, but one would think that a federal judge has a different obligation. So I would ask the members of this committee, imagine for a second you were a Republican. Imagine for a second you were a conservative who happened to live in New York City. And you look up in New York City on the federal bench and you see a judge who's described himself as a wild-eyed sort of leftist, his own words, who is motivated every day, who gets up every day, and what gets him going is his hatred for you. You know, this is the kind of fellow that should have worked at the Southern Poverty Law Center. That's the kind of radicals who this administration is nominating, and yet that is not the kind of person that should be a federal judge. And I'm going to talk about one final nominee that isn't before us today, but that will be soon, which is Charnel Beckelgren.
Yeah,
now, the
I'm
members of this
telling you,
committee
it fell
are
in my
aware
news
of
feed,
just
and I
how
was like, oh my God,
wildly
I'm so glad I watched it
unqualified
this time.
this nominee was. She's been nominated to be a federal district judge, and our colleague, Senator Kennedy, whose cross-examinations on this committee have now become legendary, he asked her what Article 5 of the Constitution was.
And
she responded saying, well, she couldn't remember. She wasn't familiar with that.
She doesn't know. These are Biden's nominees.
He then asked her what Article 2 of the Constitution was.
She didn't know.
And she said, well, that's not coming to mind either. It was a stunning display of her lack of qualifications to be a federal judge. Now, to be clear, asking someone what Article 2 of the Constitution is not some obscure legal gotcha. There are questions you can ask about bizarre, hidden legal theories that would be a gotcha, that wouldn't be fair. Not knowing what Article 2 of the Constitution is, which is what establishes the president and the executive branch,
You can't make this shit up.
any first-year law student who didn't know what Article 2 of the Constitution was would flunk con law. And I will say Chairman Durbin subsequently said publicly she was likely to get confirmed. And he went on to say that he thought there were members of this committee who couldn't answer the question Senator Kennedy asked as well. I hope and pray that's not the case. I'm confident that on the Republican side of the aisle, the members of this committee know what Article 2 is. Are there any members of this committee who care to volunteer on the Democrat side of the aisle that you don't know what Article 2 is? If you didn't, you or I or anyone who didn't know what Article 2 was would not be qualified to serve on this committee. And I will say, I want to encourage the Democrats on the committee to follow Chairman Durbin's lead. Chairman Durbin, during the Trump administration,
I want to emphasize one more time. This is identical to what happened on our platform. Did we go along with the masses and hate Ernie just so everybody else would like us? Or did we stay true to ourselves and like them anyway? Fuck it. This is a great demonstration on how the masses have just wanted to be liked and went along with the masses, went along with the crowd, sheep, following sheep. That's how Biden was elected.
Explained on a nominee, he said he invoked what he called the Senator John Kennedy test. And Chairman Durbin said, quote, I think it's a legitimate test to be applied to all those who want to be trial judges. And I hope others on both sides of the table will join me in saying it's not enough to aspire. You have to bring to this aspiration some practical experience and knowledge that suggests you can meet the standard required. And I just want to close by this, which is urging my colleagues to be willing to stand up to the White House.
Absolutely.
I'm confident that many, if not
Stand
most
up.
of you, actually care about having a qualified judiciary. One of the things I cannot understand over the last 2 years is every Democrat member of this committee has voted for every single Biden judicial nominee 100% without failing. And I will say on the Senate floor, every Democrat has voted for every Biden judicial nominee. Not a single Democrat in the United States Senate has mustered the courage to vote no on a single nominee. And to be clear, it wasn't that long ago. We had a Republican president and a Republican majority in this body, and there were many of us who said on particular nominees, this is not a good nominee. We're not going to support this nominee. In fact, the John Kennedy test that Chairman Durbin referred to came from a Trump nominee who John Kennedy eviscerated at a hearing in a video that I still liken to watching a car wreck in slow motion. It was painful. But what happened? When it became clear that this individual was not qualified for the position for which he had been nominated, the White House withdrew the nomination. And it did so after a number of us made clear we're not going to support putting an unqualified person on the bench, pull the nomination back. So I would ask members of this committee, is there anyone, if the White House nominates a ham sandwich, are Democrats prepared to rubber stamp Judge Ham Sandwich?
Hell yeah.
And this also connects to the discussion on the blue slip.
He's funny as hell, man.
Look, I understand politics. Sometimes we put on team colors and you're a Democrat or Republican and you vote with your party. And that, for a number of issues, is
You would
fine.
have just elected a ham
But
sandwich.
do any Democrat members of this committee
I'm a free
actually
thinker.
care about defending the institution of the Senate
I'm going to do what I want to do.
and your authority as a senator to represent your state? Because the blue slip, fundamentally, it's not even a partisan issue. It is fundamentally about Article 1 versus Article 2. Now, Biden's judicial nominees have no idea what I just said. But the blue slip is all about, are judges going to be picked solely by the president or by the home state senators? And let's be clear, this is not just when the opposing party is in the White House. When Donald Trump was president, there were some, I think, 22 judicial vacancies on the district.
This AI will take your idea and create a complete book, complete with design, images.
District Court in Texas. When Trump was president, Senator John Cornyn and I, we have a bipartisan federal judicial evaluation committee that puts out a notice, a call for application, that interviews, that selects very qualified nominees, recommends them to us. I can tell you, during the Trump presidency, Senator Cornyn and I, we met together, we agreed, and for each vacancy, we forwarded to the Trump White House one name. One name, and for every single one the Trump White House nominated, the one name we forwarded. If the Democrats in this committee accede to the partisans who are saying get rid of the blue slip, temporarily you'll do some harm to Republicans on this committee by ramming through some terrible judges. But what you're really doing is giving away your prerogative. Every senator who's not even looking up right now is giving away your ability. I suspect Senator Booker cares about who's a judge in New Jersey. But if the blue slip goes away or is weakened by the Democrat chairman, you know what? Senator Booker's not going to have much of a say in who a judge in New Jersey is. And that's going to be true with a Democrat president or a Republican president. Now, Senator Booker and I may not agree on who the best candidate for a judge is, but I do think if you care about being a senator, putting partisan politics above the prerogatives, above protecting this institution.
Hell no.
I still remember the day the Senate under Harry Reid used the nuclear option to end the filibuster for judges. And I remember
Well, Judge Netburn, court, what matters more, the rights of individuals or your political ideology?
I apply the law to the facts.
I asked a question, which matters more?
Well, my political ideology doesn't matter at all.
Okay, so I don't believe you. And I think this case demonstrates that you are willing to subjugate the rights of individuals to satisfy your political ideology. This case involves a male defendant who raped a 9-year-old boy. Was he guilty of that?
Yes, the petitioner pled guilty to that.
Okay, so he raped a 9-year-old boy. He also raped a 17-year-old girl. Was he guilty of that?
He pled guilty. The petitioner pled guilty to that crime as well.
So was he guilty?
I hope so, because she pled guilty to it.
He was a he when he did this.
That's correct.
And also criminal deviant conduct, which the record doesn't disclose what that was exactly. Then, after serving in prison, Mr. McClain was released for parole, but then violated the terms of parole by having internet and was sent back to prison. 1 year after being released again, he was convicted of having child pornography. Is that correct?
I'm unclear on exactly the time frame that you're at, but the petitioner was convicted of distributing child pornography.
Child pornography that was images of adults violently raping children.
Abhorrent conduct.
Okay.
For which there are real victims.
And this individual, 6'2", biologically a man. A minute ago, you said that when this man decided that he was a she, you said this individual was, quote, I wrote it down, sober and entirely a female. That phrase struck me as remarkable. Did this individual have male genitalia?
I think what I said, or at least what
that is a verbatim quote, entirely a female.
Sorry, what I meant to say was hormonally a female.
Okay, but that's not entirely. Did this individual have male genitalia?
Yes.
So you took a 6'2" serial rapist, serial child rapist with male genitalia, and he said, you know, I'd like to be in a women's prison. And your answer was, that sounds great to me. Let me ask you something. The other women in that prison, do they have any rights?
Is that a question you're asking me?
Yes, the other women in that prison, do they have any rights?
Of course.
Do they have the right not to have a 6'2" man who is a repeat serial rapist put in as their cellmate?
Senator Cruz, I considered the facts presented to me, and I reached a decision.
I asked you a
based on what
question.
the law
I asked
is.
you a question. Do they have a right not to have a 6'2" man who is a serial rapist put in as their cellmate? Do those women have a right to that?
Every person who's incarcerated has the right to be safe in their space.
But you didn't think so. You didn't think so. And in fact, I'm going to give some quotes from your order because Senator Kennedy is right. This is not a judge's order. This is a political activist. By the way, the beginning of your order says, at birth, people are typically assigned a gender. I got to say that would astonish a lot of Americans. A lot of Americans think you go to the hospital, a baby is born, and congratulations, you have a little boy, a little girl. The assigned a gender, I know you went to Brown, but it sounds like it's in a college faculty lounge with no bearing on reality. The Bureau of Prison argued what I'm saying right now, that if you put this person in a female prison, there will be a risk of sexual assault to the women. And you know what you did? You said you didn't care about the women. I'm going to quote what you wrote. You wrote, quote, the Bureau of Prisons claim penological interest in protecting female prisoners from sexual violence and trauma. This interest is legitimate, that's kind of you to say, but there are no signs that petitioner is at risk of reoffending. The record is devoid of evidence of incidents of violence or assault during petitioner's incarceration when she was the perpetrator, only the victim. A theoretical risk of sexual assault by the prisoner without more cannot support the BOP's position. No evidence, theoretical. Have you dealt, in what universe is someone who is a serial repeat child rapist not at a risk of reoffending?
Senator, as I do in every case.
Okay, I know you've been told to repeat the line, I follow the law. I asked a question. In what universe is someone who is a serial repeat child rapist not at risk of reoffending?
Sir, I looked at the facts that were before me in this case. All of the evidence, including the statements of every warden who had supervised this petitioner.
You also wrote, the BOP also posits that permitting petitioner to live among women will be traumatizing and possibly dangerous to them. This concern is overblown. I have to say, if I were the father of one of those women, and you decided that my daughter's cellmate was going to be a 6'2" man who over and over and over again committed violent sexual assault, I would say the entire justice system is absurd, and it is clear on your record your political ideology matters a heck of a lot more than the rights of those women that you endangered. I think you're a radical, and I think you have no business being a judge.
Judge Netburn, there was an opportunity during your exchange with Senator Cruz that you were attempting to offer a response relative to the conditions under which this petitioner was unsafe in the facilities in which she was being held. I'd like to offer you the opportunity to finish that response.
So the facts that were presented to me and what I relied on to make my decision were that the petitioner had engaged in no violence, no physical violence, no acts of sexual violence whatsoever while in custody. All three wardens who supervised because of her serious medical needs. In addition, the Bureau of Prisons' longtime medical provider testified at a 2-day hearing in my courtroom and recommended that the petitioner be transferred because of her serious medical needs. And the last thing I'll say is that the Transgender Executive Council, which is the body that makes decisions on behalf of transgender transfer requests within the Bureau of Prisons, never said that the petitioner could not be transferred, and never, ever said that she couldn't be transferred because of any risk of violence. What the Transgender Executive Council repeatedly said in denying the request was simply that she needed to maintain her hormone levels. That was the repeated justification for the denial of transfer. But the petitioner had reached full female hormone levels before even being incarcerated.
believe this is
At
a
the time, the
thing.
district judge placed in a women's facility. Her hormones were female at that point, and so the decision by the Transgender Executive Council to deny the transfer request based on this idea that it was only because her hormones needed to be consistent and stabilized, I found was a pretext, but they never once said she cannot be transferred because of violence. It was always based on this idea that her hormones had to be.
Thank you, Judge Netburn. Senator
Judge Netburn, that's
Padilla.
directly contrary to what your
Senator, you
report
all
says.
have
That is
had
directly
no.
No.
We're going to be.
You're going to
There is
follow up,
no
and that's how
follow-up.
we didn't get extra time. And she just directly contradicted her own report. I'm just going to read her own words
just sitting
because
fair,
it's
Madam
exactly
Chair.
the opposite of what she said. Your own report.
Senators, I gave both of
Complete
you
idiot.
more time to finish your line of questioning.
And you jumped
I
in.
allowed the witness
And you
to
jumped in
finish
and took
her.
another round.
I allowed
You
the
took
witness
another
to
round.
finish
You
her
opened the door.
response.
You
I
opened the
allowed
door
the
to this.
witness to finish
You're
her
abusing
response.
your status
That is.
Okay, I understand that,
That
you're
is
scared
not
of the
correct.
facts.
abusing
I
your
have-
status
Madam
as chair.
Senator
Madam Chair,
Padilla?
Madam
can't
Chair,
Open up
Madam
testimony
Chair.
and then
she
not
has an
give us a
obligation
chance
to explain
cross-examine?
why directly contradicted what she wrote in her report. She says in her report, the Bureau of Prisons' claimed penological interest is in protecting female prisoners from sexual violence and trauma. She just told you the Bureau of Prisons didn't say there was a concern about sexual violence and trauma. Those are directly contradictory, and why are you contradicting what you wrote in your report?
And what are you
Madam
trying to
Chair, I
hide,
believe
Madam
I have
Chair?
the floor.
No, wait, point of
I
order.
believe
Senator
I
Padilla.
have the
What are
Senator
you trying to
Padilla.
hide,
Are you going to let her
Madam
answer that question?
Senator
or you
Padilla.
don't want her to answer that question?
Senator
You're
Padilla.
afraid?
This
Very
is
much,
a
Madam
cover-up,
Chair.
Madam
Senator
Chair.
Are you
Padilla.
afraid of the answer to
This
that?
is
Colleague.
no
Cover-up.
Are
Senator
you afraid
Padilla.
of the answer to that question?
Senator
Colleagues,
Padilla.
So yes,
My
you are
time.
afraid of the answer to that question.
Senator Padilla.
Please hold
Clearly,
my
you're
time.
afraid of the answer to that question.
Okay, we're gonna watch one more here, and then I've got to go. But this is yes, this is when Kennedy asks basic questions of a Biden nominee. Okay, here we go. Okay, let me get it to present. Wait till you hear this. One of their nominees.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to all of you. Judge on the far end, tell me what Article 5 of the Constitution does.
Article 5 is not coming to mind at the moment.
Okay, how about Article 2?
Neither is Article 2.
Okay. Do you know what purposivism is?
In my 12 years as an assistant attorney general and my 9 years serving as a judge, I was not faced with that precise question. We are the highest trial court in Washington
She
state,
doesn't
so
know
I'm
the
frequently
Constitution.
faced with issues that I'm not familiar with, and I thoroughly review the law, research, and apply the law to the facts presented to me.
Well, you're going to be, if you're confirmed. I can assure you of that.
See if I can find one more other.
The images of former President Trump narrowly
Commercials.
avoiding an assassin's bullet this weekend.
Let's see, it was, where is it? Questions nominee. Yeah, this is it. Is there another one? This was Kennedy's coverage of, yeah, Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I know, right?
Judge Dixon, can you tell me about the full faith and credit clause of the Constitution?
It's me, Senator Kennedy, Judge
Oh,
Valenzuela.
I'm sorry, I can't see that far. I just got new glasses. Judge down here, and then we'll come this way.
Judge Court, Senator, I had the same issue when I walked into the room. I thought that it would be difficult to see my last name, so no need to apologize.
Okay.
So, and I apologize. Your question is the full faith and credit
clause, yes, ma'am.
clause of the Constitution. It requires that the states give full faith and credit to judgments of other states.
Okay, very good. Judge Netburn, I was looking at your resume. You went to Brown University, is that right?
I did.
And then you went to law school in California?
That's correct.
And you've worked for the Brennan Center?
I interned. I was a law student intern.
Okay. And you worked for the Center for Reproductive Law and Policy?
I was a law student intern there for 8 weeks during my 1L summer.
Okay. And you are a political activist, aren't you?
I am not. I'm a sitting United States magistrate judge.
Okay, all right. Do you remember an inmate named William McLean, also known as July Justine Shelby?
Yes, I know who you're referring to.
Okay. Mr. McLean raped a child, didn't he?
30 years ago, the petitioner in the habeas case before me.
Did he rape a child?
He pled guilty to that crime. Yes, it's abhorrent.
And then he raped he raped a little boy, right?
I believe that's correct. I believe he pled guilty to two acts of sexual violence.
And then he raped a 17-year-old girl, right?
Again, this case was handled by the state court in Indiana, but
I'm just asking you the facts.
I believe.
Don't stall on me now. Did he rape a 17-year-old girl or not after raping a 9-year-old boy?
I believe that's what he pled guilty to.
Okay, and then he went to prison, didn't he?
Yes, the petitioner was.
And then he came out and he sent child porn, basically adults raping little children, to another sex offender. And he was sent back to prison, right?
The petitioner pled guilty to
Was he sent back to prison?
Well, that case was in the federal system, so.
Was he sent back to prison?
Yes, this time to federal prison.
Thank you. And then he decided to transition, and he became a female and started going by July Justine Shelby. Is that right?
Yes.
And Ms. Shelby said, I don't want to go to a male prison. I want to go to a female prison. And the Board of Prisons said, what planet did you parachute in from? You're going to a male prison with this kind of record. And you sent him to a female prison, didn't you? You said that the Board of Prisons was trying to violate Ms. Shelby, former Mr. McLean's constitutional rights, didn't you?
I issued a report and recommendation to the district judge recommending that the district judge transfer the petitioner to a women's facility. The district judge adopted that recommendation.
The Board of Prisons was trying to violate Ms. Shelby's, Mr. McLean's constitutional rights, didn't you?
So I based my decision on the facts that were presented to me in the record
But
evidence.
wasn't that your ruling?
I recommended finding that under Estelle versus Gamble.
Why won't you admit that was your ruling? Are you ashamed of it?
I'm not. I'm answering the question. I applied Estelle versus Gamble.
Was that your ruling?
My recommendation was that the petitioner's serious medical needs were being denied by keeping her in a men's facility.
A violation of the Eighth Amendment, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And how big was Ms. Shelby, Mr. McLean?
I don't have a specific recollection. Your colleague just suggested that she was more than 6 feet tall.
And you told the Board of Prisons, well, she'll be okay. The other women in the female prison will be okay because it's only hypothetical that Ms. Shelby, Mr. McLean would reoffend again after he's already raped a 9-year-old boy and a 17-year-old girl and has been sending child porn through the mail. You said there's no chance he'll reoffend again. Did you say that?
Senator Kennedy, I based my decision on the record.
But am I right? Did you conclude that?
I don't have a specific recollection of that. I did recommend that after finding a constitutional violation.
What were you thinking in saying there's no, it's only hypothetical that she would reoffend?
The facts of the case were that the petitioner had last engaged in a contact offense 30 years ago. The petitioner had not engaged in any contact offense. In addition, the medical evidence made clear that for the last 5 years, the petitioner was sober and hormonally entirely a female, and there was no evidence.
The Board of Prisons didn't agree with you. I'm not going to run out of time here. You're really a political activist, aren't you?
I am not, sir.
But your record demonstrates otherwise.
I disagree. I apply the law to the facts and come to a fair decision. All of my decisions that have been appealed, particularly this one, the district judge adopted my report and recommendation in full, and the government did not move for a stay of the decision.
Unbelievable. There was one other that I want y'all to see. It is, oh no, it was Blackburn, wasn't it? It's Blackburn. Hold on 1 second. I got another good one here. Let's see. Senate nominee. 1 second. I'm looking for a particular something that she did the other day. Addresses. Computer's moving slow. Give me just 1 second. Oh, this right here I want to show you. I know it's a couple of months old.
Hi, I'm JT, and I made Result Hunter, the search engine for conservatives. Let me just tell you what it does. First of all,
Senator from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to each of you for coming. And I know some of you had to be subpoenaed to get here, but we do appreciate that you all are here. Mr. Chu, I want to come to you first. We've heard that you're looking at putting a headquarters in Nashville and likewise in Silicon Valley and Seattle. And what you're going to find probably is that the welcome mat is not going to be rolled out for you in Nashville like it would be in California. There are a lot of people in Tennessee that are very concerned about the way TikTok is basically building dossiers on our kids, the way they are building those on their virtual you. And also that information is held in China, in Beijing, as you responded to Senator Blumenthal and I last year in reference to that question. And we also know that a major music label yesterday said they were pulling all of their content off your site because of your issues on payment, on artificial intelligence, and because of the negative impact on our kids' mental health. So we will see how that progresses. Mr. Zuckerberg, I want to come to you. We have just had, Senator Blumenthal and I, of course, have had some internal documents and emails that have come our way. One of the things that really concerned me is that you referred to your young users in terms of their lifetime value of being roughly $270 per teenager. And each of you should be looking at these kids. Their T-shirts they're wearing today say, I'm worth more than $270. We've got some standing up in those T-shirts. Now,
I love
And
her.
some of the children from our state,
love
some of
her.
the children, the parents that we have worked with, just to think, whether it is Becca Schmidt, David Mollick, Sarah Flatt, Annalie Schote, would you say that life is only worth $270? What could possibly lead you? I mean, I listened to that. I know you're a dad. I'm a mom. I'm a grandmom. And how could you possibly even have that thought? It is astounding to me. And I think this is one of the reasons that states, 42 states are now suing you because of features that they consider to be addictive, that you are pushing forward. And in the emails that we've got from 2021 that go from August to November, there is the staff plan that is being discussed. And Antigone Davis, Nick Clegg, Sheryl Sandberg, Chris Cox, Alex Schultz, Adam Masseri are all on this chain of emails on the well-being plan. And then we get to one, Nick did email Mark for emphasis to emphasize his support for the package, but it sounds like it lost out to various other pressures and priorities. See, this is what bothers us. Children are not your priority. Children are your product. Children you see as a way to make money. And children, protecting children in this virtual space, you made a conscious decision. Even though Nick Clegg and others were going through the process of saying, this is what we do. These documents are really illuminating. And it just shows me that growing this business, expanding your revenue, what you were going to put on those quarterly filings, that was the priority. The children were not. It's very clear. I want to talk with you about the pedophile ring because that came up earlier and the Wall Street Journal reported on that. And one of the things that we found out was after that became evident, then you didn't take that content down. And it was content that showed that teens were for sale and were offering themselves to older men. And you didn't take it down because it didn't violate your community standards. Do you know how often a child is bought or sold for sex in this country? Every 2 minutes. Every 2 minutes, a child is bought or sold for sex. That's not my stat. That is a TBI stat. Now, finally, this content was taken down after a congressional staffer went to Meta's global head of safety. So would you please explain to me and to all these parents why explicit predatory content does not violate your platform's terms of service or your community standards?
Sure, Senator. Let me try to address all of the things that you just said. It does violate our standards. We work very hard to take it down.
Didn't take it down.
We've reported, I think it's more than 26 million examples of this kind of content.
Didn't take it down until a congressional staffer brought it up.
It may be that in this case, we made a mistake and missed something.
I think you make a lot of mistakes.
But we
so
have,
let's
we have
move
leading
on.
teams that
I want to
identify more
talk
than...
with you about your Instagram Creators Program and about the push. We found out through these documents that you actually are pushing forward because you want to bring kids in early. You see these younger teenagers as valuable but an untapped audience, quoting from the emails, and suggesting teens are actually household influencers to bring their younger siblings into your platform, into Instagram. Now, how can you ensure that Instagram creators, your product, your program, does not facilitate illegal activities when you fail to remove content pertaining to the sale of minors. And it is happening once every 2 minutes in this country.
Senator, our tools for identifying that kind of content are industry leading. That doesn't mean we're perfect. There are definitely issues that we have, but we continue to
Mr.
invest a ton in it.
Zuckerberg, yes, there are a lot that is slipping through. It appears that you're trying to be the premier sex trafficking
Of course
site
not, Senator.
in this country.
Senator, that's ridiculous.
No,
S-
it
Senator,
is not ridiculous.
Of
You
course
want to
we don't
turn
want
around
this-
and
we
tell
don't want
these
this
people
content
that.
on our platforms, and we
Why don't you take it down?
We do take it
We
down.
are here discussing.
We do
We
more
need
work to
you
take it
all
down
to
than-
work
than-
with
than-
us. No, you're not. You are not. And the problem is, we've been working on this. Senator Welch is over there. We've been working on this stuff for a decade. You have an army of lawyers and lobbyists that have fought us on this every step of the way. You work with Net Choice, the Cato Institute, Taxpayers Protection Alliance, and Chamber of Progress to actually fight our bipartisan legislation to keep kids safe online. So are you going to stop funding these groups? Are you going to stop lobbying against this and come to the table and work with us? Yes or no?
Senator, we have a.
Yes or no?
Of course, we'll work with you on the legislation.
Okay,
I
the
mean,
door
it's hard
is
to-
open. We've got all these bills. You need to come to the table. Each and every one of you need to come to the table, and you need to work with us. Kids are dying.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and head out, and thank you for joining me, Rabbit. I appreciate it. I wanted to talk about more pertinent issues than one earner shell. So thanks again for joining me, and catch me later. I'll be live later. Talk to you soon. Bye.
To take my pride away from me. You don't ever listen, and you live with your complacency. You don't scare me, but you should fear me. The sun is setting, don't trust your hearing. You made a monster, I'm your imposter. Go ahead and wander, but don't trust the water. I'm an honor of the deep.